the tempo starts setting the pace. We get into it next on Beyond the Locker Room. So this past week, the Toronto Tempo had a big week. The WNBA draft occurred on Monday. We now know in this case, Kiki Rice is their first round pick. They also had 2 other picks in this case as well too. We'll get into those ones as well too. Overall, it was I think a pretty successful draft for them. But I think when we move forward now, we get to see kind of what the plan, what the vision is for the Tempo. And I'm going to discuss what my thoughts are on that. Of what we see on that front. You know, I said before, at the moment, Kiki Rice, guard from UCLA. UCLA had, I believe, 5 players picked in the first round, which was crazy. A record, I believe. I think, sorry, yeah, 5. I think 5. I think they picked up. You know, the first round. Guard for UCLA. Second round in the 22nd pick, they ended up picking up Tioni Key from Kentucky. The forward center from there. And then also the second round, a few picks later, they picked Saffron Shields, guard forward for Australia. I think she's going to sit out for a little bit there and continue to develop there. And then on the third round, 36th pick, Charlize Dunn, guard forward from Davidson. You know, maybe she'll get a shot. Who knows? Maybe she'll have to play overseas for a bit, but who knows if she'll make the team. But we'll find out in the next few weeks what that looks like with Brondello and company. But overall, I'm going to get into what Kiki Rice, I think, could provide. What she can provide, because that's really the focus we're looking at, and then what the philosophy around the Temple's looking to do, I think, moving forward. So Kiki Rice, I said before, she's 5'11", good size in this case for a guard. She has great instincts, when it comes to defending the perimeter. She's also, I guess she's a hustle player, but she's a lot more skilled than that. Sometimes a hustle player has a certain connotation around it, but she can ball. She's great at at switching and peeling switches and then also coming back into transition for shot blocking. So, does her own version of the LeBron block. So she's good at hustling down plays. So she doesn't give up on stuff, which is great to see. She has pretty good playmaking and vision. So let's get to that. Probably wouldn't consider one of the best distributors in the nation. And in this draft class for sure. She's ranked, according to Substat, she's ranked 94th percentile for assist to turnover ratio as a freshman, and then consistently improved her ability to generate rim assists as her career went along at UCLA. Downhill scoring, I think this is where things get interesting for this roster, and I'll get into that more later why I think so. So Rice, is very potent, very adept in this case for open floor transition. And she utilized her speed and strength also too to kind of bully her way into the paint. Pretty physical guard, and then forcing defenses to collapse and creating kick-out opportunities for shooters. See that again? Let's repeat again. She has a bully ball way, but when she gets in the paint, she forces defenses to collapse and creates kick-out opportunities for shooters. We'll get that in a second. Also, composure and leadership. Obviously, saw the championship team. I think they have their nickname on the team as Cool Hand Kiki, based on the movie on Paul Newman movie Cool Hand Luke. She is praised by for even keeled demeanor, and her relaxed demeanor during high pressure games. So and we saw it throughout the whole championship run as well too. So that's what that's great, and that's what you want for your floor general. That type of level headedness. In any situation, be able to kind of organize things when things seem hectic around them. So that's fantastic. Now, that's the strengths. Now, weaknesses wise, pace control, let's get into that. So, a lot of times the scouting reports will kind of get into her inability sometimes to regulate her speed, and sometimes she tries to go 100 miles per hour so she could get sped up at times. When plays calls for some dialing back. So that's one of the things that hopefully as she continues to grow, which I think we saw during the tournament, that she could control the pace and control the speed, her own mindset of being aggressive and moving forward. Sometimes I guess in other ways, isolation creation. This is one of the reasons why personally I preferred someone like Flage for this reason, which is isolation creation. So sometimes she can struggle in this case being an isolation creator and not as comfortable with it. She doesn't really have that type of pop or athleticism that we expect. Explosiveness is probably the better word for it. And, so sometimes she could be a little stiff, when handling the ball around screens. Once again, so rationale why I was kind of more for Flage in that sense for those two very reasons, because she's a much more fluid player, could really get her shot much more cleanly off the bounce, in my opinion. But that's fine. I mean, I got no issue with the Rice pick overall, just to be upfront. I thought the Rice pick was a solid pick. It's a really good pick in this case for an early franchise where you don't want any ruffle any feathers and have maybe even the media on you early. I'm not saying that would happen with Flage either, but I think Flage, for some reason, is a little bit more polarizing. I don't get it, but fair enough. Outside shooting consistency. So while her three-point shooting has improved to 38.5% in her senior year, it has been a bit of something of a concern throughout her career at UCLA. So that, and she was known to be hesitate on open shots, which seems like she's gotten over that a bit, but something to watch now. She's in the big leagues now. Can she pull the trigger when she gets the open looks? So that's one of those things where we have to kind of watch, as time goes on with her and her growth, but it's going to be fascinating to see. So the philosophy around the tempo so far, and it was in that key point that they mentioned about her strengths, right? So if you look and see how they built this team initially prior to the draft, there are a lot of guards here, a lot of guards in this case that could knock down shots, Mabry and others. And when you look at the roster, and then now you add Rice to it, you can see now she's potentially being some type of offensive engine that can actually generate opportunities for all these other guys, in this case, to kind of knock down shots. And I think that's what we're looking at here, be if it's, Alamon, held if she's on the squad. Of course, Mabry, who's definitely going to be part of this rotation. And you can see how it's playing out a little bit from that perspective. So that's something to watch on that front. So you can see how they're matching it together. She's looking to push the pace. You're called the tempo for a reason, but she's looking for a fast tempo to some extent. I think, very similar to their Raptor brethren, where they want to push the ball, push the pace. And I think definitely that is also one of her strengths. So you can see the rationale behind that as well, too. I think the third reason, from a philosophy standpoint, I think Kiki Rice gives them a certain demeanor and face that they want to present to the sporting public and the public at large, especially when you have the first pick ever as a franchise. I mean, if you're not aware of her background or her family background, not saying this is necessarily related to her, but she kind of moves in a very professional manner. Her aunt in this case is the former ambassador for the United States, Susan Rice, and she's got family here in Toronto. So therefore, from a cultural standpoint, it shouldn't be much of like a jump in this case compared to, say, if you pick some other players who may never ever been to Toronto or even set foot in Canada. For her, that is not an issue. So that's a great bonus in this case as well, too. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And I think, looking at it from that perspective, I think this is where, it's good to see what they've done here. Now, on the other side of things, let me just quickly jump into the second round pick as well, too, as part of their philosophy. GM Monica Wright had mentioned a presser, also mentioned those same attributes when it came to Kiki. But when the reporters asked her about the second round pick, in this case, of Tioni Key, from Kentucky, she said, obviously that, it's pretty obvious, like, we have a lot of guards at the moment on the roster, essentially paraphrasing her, we had to, she kind of met the need and met what we wanted as the type of player we want. So that's great to see from that perspective. And I think she's going to be someone I think she's going to get a fair amount of minutes. I think people might be surprised because this team doesn't have a ton of size on it right now. Sabali, of course, probably will be starting at center on this team at the moment. But when you look at the front court right now, it's pretty thin. Just looking here quickly at the roster, man, it's like there's not a lot of C's and F's around here. Let's put it that way, man. Fang Benley, I never can pronounce her name, man. Every time I see it. Temi, let's put it that way. She might actually start, so we'll see. But, of course, Isabel Harrison, the vet, she'll definitely be in the mix around there as well, too, for a potential starting spot. But there's not a lot of forward and depth and center depth. So to get Key, in this case, in the second round, made perfect sense. Just to wrap things up, I'm very excited what I see here for the tempo. I think I like the philosophy they're going with. I still think they need a natural creator. And I do wonder, and this kind of plays up to me, my final thoughts on maybe where they're going with this. I don't expect them to be tanking this season. They look like they're going to have a fairly competitive team. And I think Golden State kind of showed the way last year. But in some ways, I don't even know if they need to really force their hand and be that competitive in year one. Because if you see who's coming down the pike from a draft standpoint in the next year or two, you got Hidalgo coming out. You got, in this case, of course, a few others, including who. You got Juju. And I do wonder, if you look at how this team's built, it's built really for a player like that to kind of just slide in to be that true offensive engine, for everyone to be able to knock down shots, to take pressure off of, this case here, someone like, Kiki Rice. Like, it is built for someone like that. So we'll see what type of strategy or type of perspective they take as the season goes on. If they're just looking to put a good, decent, competent team, but not really forcing the issue of trying to win games to make a playoff run or anything like that, like Golden State, or they are going to do the Golden State rationale, just, hey, we're going to put the best team we can forward up front, and we're going to do our thing. So we'll see where this leads to, but it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. Connecticut's their first game. Tickets are on sale, as they say. A new element, a new team in the city. We haven't had one like that in a little while. So, hey, man, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to try to get down there myself, man. So, check out, support the hometown girls. And I'll be talking a lot of tempo over the summer. And once again, guys, thanks for, giving me the support. Keep on doing it. Appreciate the comments and the likes and the comments and everything like that. And once again, you can find me on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Blue Sky. Once again, you can also find me right here on YouTube. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Subscribe's for free, as always, folks. And just as FYI, you can check out what I had to say as a more deep dive, in this case, on To The Point. I just posted recently about the Raptors playoff series with the Cavaliers, so check that out as well, too. And as always, guys, keep it locked. Peace.